Doing good? Okay. All right. Well, how about if I just have you stand for the whole service? No. Turn to Job chapter 40. This doesn't happen very often, but we're kind of coming to a close on one book on Wednesday night, coming to a close on a book on Sunday mornings. We'll be finishing Philippians within a week or two. I don't know how far we'll get this Sunday, but then we'll be starting Colossians. So Wednesday nights we're going to be going into the Beatitudes on Wednesday nights for a while until the summer when we go to the Psalm of the Ascents. We'll be going through the Psalms, some of the Psalms, and Jack has some Bibles. If you need a Bible, raise your hand. He'll give you a Bible. And so we come to we have Job 40 and 41 tonight. We'll be at Job 42 next week, Lord willing. I say that because I'd rather be in the presence of Jesus. We'll be out of here. The rapture just can take place anytime. Let's go home and be with the Lord. But we come to this place and I think it's exciting. I mean, people say you're a doomsdayer, and I'm like, I'm a Jesus freak, man. Anyway, we come to this place in the passage where, remember Job, what's been going on here, just real briefly. He's been talking to his friends. They've been talking to him. He's been living through the death of his 10 children, just going through a hard time, difficult time in life, lost everything. And the whole time that his friends have come and kind of counseled with him, supposedly, he's been talking back with them. They've been at this place to where, not knowing what's going on, they don't know the fact that there's been an attack. This attack from Satan himself has come down to try and, his goal was to get Satan, or get Job to curse God. He said, well, if you just let go of him, I'll watch this. Let me attack him, and I'll make sure that I know he'll just curse you. And so he comes to the place of that happening, that taking place. Job doesn't curse him. His wife tells him to curse God and die, and he doesn't do it then. And then he says, well, if I just inflict him, if I take everything away from him that you give him. Many people think that, they just worship the Lord because they have something. You know what I have? I have salvation. And that should be it in itself, to worship God. But then then he said, well, if he just give me his, physical ability, his health, then he'll turn from me. And that didn't happen. He didn't turn from him. He's questioning himself. He's questioning his friends. He's questioning God. There's no doubt through all this time of talking. And in chapter 38, right before we got there, right before the Lord began to speak, we have seen that God has been listening this whole time. You never forget about it, man. He's there. In the midst of what they've been talking about and going through in every conversation, through the duration of all their... I would think if I was the Lord, and I'm not, and praise God for that, but I might have interrupted them at some time and said, hang on a second. But he just, lets them get the air out of the bag, kind of thing. And he talks, he's watching them, and then he shows up on the scene and he addresses them. And he addresses Job, and he comes to this place of Job, and he says, Job, you know what? Where have you been through all creation? I've been there. Where have you been? You think he's going through a hard time, and he's at that place. He's asked God, why was I even born if I'm going through this stuff, And God asked him, he says, I've created the earth, the sky, the animals, all that are in them. He goes through all these species of animals that he's created, all this stuff. This is incredible. And Job, where were you? Where were you in all of this? And he's like, did you have a part in this? And, and bringing up of all of his creation, all of what he's done, he's brought up these several different species of animals. And he's going to do the same today. But he asked Job the authority thing. The authority, I've created all this, so therefore I have authority over them. You have no authority whatsoever. You have no control. And as a matter of fact, he asked him in chapter 39, he said, where did you get could you get the wild donkey to serve you, He couldn't get the wild donkey to serve you. Could you get a hawk to fly by your wisdom? Would a hawk come out and can you make it fly? And I think that's really cool, but no, I can't do that. And then he asked him, have you given strength like to the wild horses? A couple of the questions he asked him, he's like, no, you haven't given him strength. And so in all of this, it's as if the Lord is here and he wants Job to understand, or at least be reminded once again, that you, Job, pale in comparison to who I am. And you think about it today too, you and I, right? We're we're playing handball up against a curb compared to God. I mean, God is just phenomenal in everything that he does. And everything he created, Genesis tells us, out of bara. He didn't borrow nothing. He didn't borrow nothing. Bara means he created it out of nothing. He didn't need anything to create the universe. He didn't need anything to create what he created, where scientists will need things, to create things. He didn't need anything. I was thinking about this for a minute. We couldn't create anything out of anything. I'm not much of a creator, but my daughter and I came up with an invention. It's called man dip. Ever heard of man dip? She came over to the house one day and she had these cookies. She goes, "Dad, I am so sorry." I go, "You brought cookies. What are you sorry for?" And she said, "I am so sorry I didn't have time to frost them, but I brought the container with me." And I thought, that's not a problem. That's a blessing. And so we discovered this man dip. You just take the cookie and dip it in the frosting. It's wonderful. It started showing up at potlucks, and there's a container and vanilla wafers, man, and you got your man dip. Well, the funny thing about this is, we were, I don't know where we were, but we got this little container. I think one of the grandkids got it, and it had vanilla wafers and some frosting on the side of it. They stole it, but we didn't have our patent, I guess. So, we couldn't take claim to saying that we created it, but it was funny that now it's being sold. So there's your thing that I've created, but nothing. My man dip isn't anything in compared to what God has created through the universe. Amen. Think of what he's created, you and I, and just the incredible things. And it's also important to keep in mind is God, we're wondering about what he's doing in our lives, because he's created everything. I can't even figure. I'm not a scientist. I start talking. I'm on this email list from Mace Baker, and he's got about, I don't know how many people. He's sending them once a week, and it's just incredible, the reminders of creation. And, Mace, he's been here a couple of times, just a wonderful, wonderful man who knows creation, and probably the number one guy in dinosaurs. So after today, you'll have to ask him about, when he comes in September, you'll have to ask him about the dinosaurs. Mace, what about the dinosaurs? He's just incredible. But, he's talking about the creation, and you think about the vastness of God, how big he is, and all that he's created. And then you think when something goes awry in our lives, or something just doesn't go up to par, then we begin to wonder, and we think, okay, what's going on? Like, we should be able to figure it out. And this is where truly faith comes in. Faith. We got to trust God. We're just trusting him. We don't live by sight. We're not to walk by sight, but we're to walk by faith. Just trusting the Lord. And remember, Isaiah said this in Isaiah 55. He said, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts," and he's speaking of the Lord, "nor are my ways your ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways in your ways, and my thoughts in your thoughts." And so you get the picture that whatever God may be doing is far greater than what you and I can, at a lot of times, even comprehend. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know. And he doesn't have to tell me. It's just, okay, Lord, just help me to walk where you want me to walk. Help me to live in the path, in that narrow path where you want me to live in. And I'll just do it. I just want to honor you, if I don't know what tomorrow brings, I don't have to know what tomorrow brings, And I think the conclusion from Job's 4 friends, obviously when he talked to Job, 3 of them said that he's living in sin, and God was chastening him because he was living in sin. The 4th was the youngest, Elihu. He said that God was correcting Job. You needed some correction in your life, and so God's correcting you. And none of these guys were able to come up with why the problem, why Job was going through what he was going through. None of them were able to come up with what God is able to, do. They can't even, they're speaking supposedly on behalf of God, but they're not speaking the oracles of God. They're not speaking the word of God. And they have no idea really what God is capable of. So the interesting thing here is now God is going to question Job. And so in verse 20, he's been talking to Job. He says, in verse 1, he says in chapter 40, "Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, Shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer it. And after he spoke with Job, in the end, Job is still a man, just like you and I. And Job can do nothing in comparison to what God can do. There's no way that you and I can even fathom everything that God has. I don't know. I don't know what he's got planned. I don't know what he's doing. But there's a need a lot of times that where we want to understand. We want to have this thing. We just got to have our hands on it somehow. It's like Job. I just got to figure it out. And even in the hardest times in our trials of life, these are things we look at that I just want to understand. And this is remember the famous 3-letter question, the biggest question on earth is why? Why am I going through this? Why is this that way? Why is that this way? And all these things. And keep in mind, Job's going through a hard time. There's no doubt about it. Earlier, he made reference to wanting to have the chance to meet God face to face. In some ways, he was saying opposing him. And he's just like, if I can only express myself to God. Sometimes it's kind of big when you're alone, and then all of a sudden you're in the presence of God. It's like, whoa, And remember what he said earlier. In chapter 10, Job said this. He says, my soul loathes my life. I will give free course to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. See, Job's heart is kind of under trial or under this condemnation. I'm just this bitterness in my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Show me why you contend with me. He's asking, like, why are you fighting with me? I mean, that's what Job thinks. He doesn't understand the things. Satan was attacking him. The relationship with God and his children, he's not going to fight with us. He's not going to fight with us. He doesn't have that relationship. He's a father to a son. No, every good and perfect gift comes from our Father who's in heaven without variation. He just has the ability, the desire to bless us. And yes, Satan was here, and Satan was attacking him. And it doesn't mean that we're going to go without being attacked or going without hatred in this world. This world opposes Jesus. You see the article in Fox News that there was a USC guy who a few years back had given Bibles to every one of his football players, and most of them were ripped up and laid on the floor. They didn't want them. But Job's saying, you know what? Why are you fighting? Why are you contending with me? And in the 23rd chapter, Job speaking, he said, would he contend with me in his great power? No, but he would take note of me. And the question might be that, Job, are you trying now to indict God? What are you trying to do? You're going through a hard time. I mean, we think that, remember, we're citizens of heaven, and we go through a hard time. We've really got to just understand God is working all things out for the good of those who love him, called according to his purpose. I don't understand, but we have to have faith. And Job here is pretty much being corrected. I think of guys like Habakkuk who didn't understand what God was doing. He had no clue. What are you doing, God? I mean, he had a clue. He knew the Chaldeans were coming after him. He knew that they were going to take him captive, but he didn't understand why, because they were a sinful nation. I mean, these guys are evil. Why would you use those guys to come against us? But he had this conversation with God, and in the end of his conversation, remember what he says? He says, I will stand my watch and set myself on a rampart. I'm going to remove myself from this situation. I'm going to get alone, and I will watch to see what he says to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. So Habakkuk knew that if anybody was going to be corrected, he was going to be corrected, not God. God, I've said what I said, and now I want to move on. I want you to say what you have to say. And I've asked God some questions before. I'm sure all of you have too, right? We've asked him questions, maybe even why, about certain things. But even if we don't understand why or what, or even if we think what is right, we've got to listen to God to say, God, you know truth. You know truth, and you know why or what's going on, and you know what? I want you to share with me concerning the matter. And trust me, I've been corrected by the Lord. I don't know if any of you have. I've been corrected by the Lord. And I've grown fond of accepting it in my life, the correction that God brings. It doesn't bother me. It's a very good friend of mine, because when he corrects me and when he corrects you, it's a testimony of his love for you. Remember what he says in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 6, for whom the Lord loves, he chastens. And so when we're being corrected, when there's this chastening going, I'm all right with it. But the interesting thing is that Job wasn't being chastened. There was no chastening in Job's life. There was nothing wrong in his life in that sense. He was under attack, spiritual warfare. So you look at the verse 3, and here's Job's first response to God. He says, then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am vile. And again, this is a place of emptiness that he was at, that none of his friends and all that they have said was able to bring to him to this position. And he said, when God gets in his grill and he says, you know what, I want you to answer, he says, you know what, none of his friends were able to get him to this point. He says, what shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. Or once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. And then what we see here is this humility that you set in. Like I said, you can talk all you want until you get in the presence of God. You're going to change the tune a little bit. You talk about somebody, they walk through the door. You know, this is God we're talking about. And it's as if Job was saying, however I've addressed something in the past, it's not the way I want to do it now. You want to take back those words. You want to take back what you said. I think Job feels at this point that, especially after hearing from the Lord, that it was time for him to say nothing else. You ever been there? Oops, I'm done. Let me just be silent for a little bit. Lord, forgive me. And then in verse 6, we're going to see the challenge, God's first challenge to Job. He says, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, now earlier Elihu made reference to the storm coming in, and he described the storm as God, right? He described the storm as, made reference to the Lord using the storm as the approaching storm. In chapter 38, it said the Lord spoke out of a whirlwind. He began speaking to Job. And here again, he continues to speak out of this whirlwind. And he says, now, in verse 7, prepare yourself like a man, and he said, I will question you, you will answer me. I mean, I don't know how much pride people will have on earth, but they're going to have answer to the Lord someday, right? Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, the Lord of God. Those in heaven, well, of course they will, because they've gone to heaven because they've already confessed Christ. Those on the earth, which are here now, and those under the earth, those who are going to go to hell because they have denied Christ, but they're still going to say they're going to acknowledge Him as Lord. I mean, there's nobody going to get away from that. But He says, you know what? If you want to contend with God, especially like Job in this case here, it's more than likely that you'll have to answer like God is telling Job to, prepare yourself like a man. That's all you are. By the way, you get into a ring with one of these fighters, I'm not a man anymore. I'm afraid. As big as I am, I'm afraid. You know, but when you go to face God, you're a man. You're mankind, you women. You're mankind, you're women. Same thing. And you're standing before God, and you want people on earth that rebel against God now. They rebel against Him. And they're going to have to answer. And then it's just the case of what it is. And God, you know, the entire time here, God is, all He has to do is snap His fingers and then a flood comes or fire comes or something. But you know what He does? His long suffering. His grace is being poured out. That's our God. And the unsaved world looks at our God and just saying, you know what, He is ridiculous. I can't believe that He won't let me live the way He allow me to live. God says, I love you too much to let you live the way you want to live. I died for that. And there are times when, I tell you, I've been led to do something I felt was good by the Lord. I felt, yeah, this is what God had me do. And then there's been some times when the Lord has shown His opinion on the matter, and I'm like, I'll bow down to that one. I want to bow down to what you want. There's a question, you know, hey, prepare yourself like a man. And when we're coming to the Lord and we think about what He has for us, bowing down to Him, He's just got this incredible, enormous loving kindness, this grace that He just wants to work in our lives, move in our lives. But, you know, He says that He will resist the proud, but pour His grace out on the humble. Resist the proud. I don't want to fight the Lord. I don't want to fight Him. I don't want that guy. I mean, I'm not a fighter anyway. I don't like fighting. My wife and I have a great relationship. We don't argue. It's my way. No, I'm just kidding. We just don't argue. And we just love it that way. We have peace in our home, you know. And I don't want to fight the Lord unless I find myself limping around for the rest of my life like Jacob. You know, I just don't want. Hey, what happened to you? I got in a fight. I've just been wrestling with God. I don't want that. And this is an amazing reprimand by God to Job. Again, his 3 friends, they've come to him. 4 friends are unsuccessful in their attempts as to why Job is going through what he's going through. But God's going to get to the bottom of this. He has no problem. You stand up to me, I'll take care of this. I mean, they've been talking from chapters 4 on, and in and out, one friend, another friend, then Job. And they come to this place to where God says, I'll take care of this. I'll take care of this. And Job, your self-justification that he was, not acting wickedly, it was almost like he was saying that God was acting wickedly in his actions, his words. In verse 8, he says this, would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you condemn me that you may be justified? Have you an arm like God? Or can you thunder with a voice like his? Then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor. Then array yourself with glory and beauty. Disperse the rage of your wrath. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. So if you can do all this stuff, Job, yeah, go ahead. You save yourself. Wouldn't it be neat to be able to bring the prideful down? Then I have to start with myself, right? But Job in no way was in no way in comparison to God. God is God. Nothing in comparison to him. It's like you and I. We're not God. He has this thing far greater than what we can comprehend. But because of Job's earlier comments, it made God made him out to be the bad guy. And he's going to constantly questioning Job. And he's getting to the bottom of this. Hey, Job, what's going on with all this? And now the Lord wants to get into Job's heart and mind. And I think the thing that you and I look at, no matter what we go through on earth, we look at Job going through a pretty hard time, no doubt about it. But no matter how tough of a time that we go through, no matter how bad things can get in our lives, we're in need of God. And we need to go to him, and he's always there with his arms wide open. It's not like people have this thing about the church, the church is going to do this, or the pastor, man, don't go to that leadership. No, you're going to be in trouble then. If they find out that you're doing that, I think it's just like a hospital room, right? You look at these 4 walls, you come in here, and if somebody's there just been out in the world for the last 6 months and they got sin in their lives and they're like, what am I going to do? How can I make this happen? How can I get right with life and all this stuff that goes on? And you think, man, God is just wanting to fix you. He's wanting to help you. And he has these arms wide open. Well, come on in. Come on in. That's what he's like, just come in. I just want to fix you up. In the church, we should be for one another. We should be helping. As we saw Sunday, Yodia and Syntyche, we should be helping them. People with problems, that's part of the church. That's part of the responsibility of the church. But we're not God. And we bring them to him and watch God just fix them up and let him do the work that he wants to do. And I think of even when you come to a place like even the gods that man makes, sometimes man elevates things in the place of God. And it doesn't matter what it is. Careers, hobbies, whatever it might be. Even in the days where there's trinkets and there's gods, we were dropped off in El Salvador, I think it was, Carl. I was trying to remember when we were going to go to the Mayan ruins. And I'm not much of a history buff. I'm like, the beach was that way, and it was a nice beach to my understanding, and the leader wanted to go to the Mayan ruins. So I'm like, I've seen enough ruins. I lived in the hood growing up, But we went to the Mayan ruins. The first thing we do is we get out of the van, and they got all these little trinkets, these little skulls and all this stuff. And you got to sell something, like it came out of the ruins or something. But, you think about who made those. You think about the people that would worship those. And I think of the Psalm 115 where it says, but our God is in heaven. But our God is in heaven, and he does whatever he pleases. And you think about that because it's true. He's going to do whatever he wants. And we need to understand this. But the thing is in verse 4 it says, their idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they do not speak. Eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Noses they have, but they do not smell. They have hands, they do not handle. Feet they have, and they do not walk. Nor do they mutter through their throat. Those who make them are like them, so is everyone who trusts in them. And it's like, so the world lives after. We have a big God. We have a God in heaven. We have a God who dwells within man, where two or more are gathered. There he is in the midst. And he so longs to be in the presence of his people, just hanging with them, ministering to them, comforting them, leading them. And so, as the Lord, earlier, as I mentioned, he used several species of his creation, bringing to Job, have you created any of these, tamed any of these? Could you do any of that? You had no power over them, right? And he turns to him. Now we're going to look at two of his greatest creations, as far as creatures are concerned. And he's going to use those as an example. So the first one, we look at the example of Behemoth in verse 15. Now look at Behemoth, which I made along with you. So, I mean, you think about this right here. Something to understand. These big dinosaurs, these big creatures, they're not mythological things. God says, I created them just like I did you, Job. God created them. And before we even get into all this stuff, many commentators will try and describe them as crocodiles or whatever, and I'm like, let's just leave this alone. Let's just let God describe them. But listen to the description of these things. I mean, he eats grass like an ox. See now his strength are in his hips and his power in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. His strength of his weapon. You imagine moving his tail and just smashing trees down. His bones are like beams of bronze. His ribs are like bars of iron. He is the first of the ways of God. Only he who made him can bring near his word. And surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. He lies under the lotus trees in a covert of reeds and marsh. The lotus trees cover him with their shade. The willows by the brooks surround him. Indeed, the rivers may rage, and yet he is not disturbed. You know, the waters he talks about just at flood stage. All the other animals are fleeing, but Behemoth doesn't do that. He's just one bad dude. He's confident, though the Jordan gushes into his mouth, and though he takes it in his eyes, or one pierces his nose with a snare. And again, many people will bring this out about being a crocodile of some sort. But I'm gonna tell you, I think that it is what it is. It is what it says. Is God created all things. He created this animal. He created this huge thing. I'll show you some pictures in a minute. But he did some creating. God created him just as he did Job. But he wanted Job to understand this in the sense that I've done both you, man, and I've created this animal. You think of when the angels were created, they were a created being. Then when the fall of man, there was the fall there. Well, when man was created, or the fall of the angels, Lucifer came down from heaven. And you think of how mad he was because when he created mankind, he created them in the image of God. That's what he always wanted to be. And the image of God, that's the way, just what he longed for. He longed to be in the position of God, longed to be looked at by God. And we're going to be higher than the angels in the end of time, when we travel through into all eternity. But you think of what God is saying here to Job. He says, look, I created this big monster and I've created you. And Job, in his day, you've got to understand, he's talking about these things and describing them to Job, and Job knows. I mean, we may have pictures that were made up or pictured or painted or the best that the scientists can do, or, the biologists or whoever may come up with these things. But Job was there, so Job knows this. This is a generation maybe after Noah, after the great flood. It's pre-law, pre-Moses, pre all of the things that, all of this stuff. And so Job, not having any part of creation, he also brings to Job these two creatures, the biggest animals, and implying to Job that there's nothing you can do in creating them, and there's nothing you can do in taming them. You'd have no control over them. And you think about something as big as maybe one of these dinosaurs or these big, huge animals were. And we have a picture, I think, of Behemoth, whatever you want to call him. These are just pictures, right? I think it's a cool picture. I don't know if that's exactly it. But though nobody's seen them, let me tell you, again, I think Job has. Job knew what God was talking about. He didn't have to explain it like we just look back and we do research on them. But Job knew. Again, this is pre-law, it's pre-Moses, pre-priest, pre-all these things. And animals, the water never hurt them. Scientists had sightings of them according to answers in Genesis. According to this Makal, this African biologist, he's a trained scientist. He gave a detailed report of seeing a Mokili Membe on May 1st of 1983 in the shallow waters of a remote lake in Teli. 5 meters or 16 feet of this animal, 16 feet of it was visible. Just 16 feet of it, but they said it was huge. The idea, you think of dinosaurs, isn't an unlikely thing at all. In view of what the Bible teaches in real history and of the world, we see dinosaurs in the Bible and it's there. You think of places like Africa where they go, and there's been so much that has not been explored in Africa. I mean, so much that is ample, probably very suitable for dinosaurs even at this time. Thousands of squares of kilometers of impenetrable swamps that are down there. That nobody's gone down into, you think of the thick jungles of Congo. Nobody's gone down there. Nobody's been there. Nobody cares to go there. And let me tell you this, I am not volunteering to go there. But the same can be said for the possibility of sea monsters. I was doing this research, a little bit of a research, quick search on submarines, how far they can go. They got some subs that can go, down pretty far. But they say that there's even life down there in the ocean, that deep. And with 2/3 of our planet being covered by water, and the average depth is 10,000 feet, but the deepest is like 7 miles, and it would cover Mount Everest. 7 miles deep. Can you imagine that? I mean, I love the ocean, but I like the land a whole lot better. And God mentioned several things about Behemoth here, Behemoth. It's possible that Job, as a fellow creature, he says, he mentions this, its position with Job. He says his diet, his physical strength, his inhabitants, his fierceness. And in all wanting to point out again that Job, you have nothing in comparison to this. Nothing. And if Job was unable to control Behemoth, then how could he control or contend with God? I mean, look, you couldn't control anything that I showed you. You couldn't control the birds. You couldn't control any of these things. And now I'm showing you these guys, what can you do? And then he uses this example of Leviathan in chapter 41. He says, can you draw Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Look at it. Wouldn't that be something? I can't even catch a fish. How about if I threw a line out there? Bob can't either. And I threw a line out there and you got this Leviathan comes up. I'm thinking, these guys that go on these little boats, and we used to take these little boats, 12-foot, 16-foot boats out to Coronado Islands with that little motor on them, going out to the Coronado Islands, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. One time I took Elaine, and a buddy of mine were taking Elaine, and we were first dating, and we started going out of the jetty at the bay in San Diego. And, we're not safe. Honey, let's go and take you on a boat ride. We're not going to go out to Coronado Islands. And we start going out there, and the boat dies, the motor dies. And the waves are coming in, it's pushing us towards the jetty. And I'm thinking, oh no, what did I do here? Good impression. So my buddy's name's Joe. I said, Joe, you better get your act together. It's your boat. And we forgot to vent the gas. And we finally got fired up and go, okay, let's go. And she goes, we're going that way. We're going in. But he's asking, can you draw out Leviathan, with a hook? Can you possibly think, I love our grandkids. You throw a bobber out there. You ever see the grandkids and you see the bobber going, and all of a sudden, bloop, bloop, and a little, little fish on it or whatever it is. And they just think, but nothing can compare to Leviathan, Verse 2, he says, can you put a reed through his nose, right? Or pierce his jaw with a hook? It's just showing the man's inability to take control over this creature. Will he make many supplications to you? Will he speak softly to you? So not only can you do anything to him, do you have the control over him and the control of what, can he make supplications to you? Can he speak softly to you? Can you control his thing? Can you control his attitude? It's like, come on, Leviathan, let's just sit down. Let's be gentle together. Right? He's looking at you like, who are you? And that's the idea that God, I believe, wants to give Job. He says, will he speak softly to you? Will he make a covenant with you? Will he take him as a servant or will you take him as a servant forever? Can you play with him as a bird? Look at God says, can you put him in a cage and take him to your kids and put them? Look at a little bird I got for you today. Whatever the bird noise is, look at the little birdie, tweet, 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 tweet. And can you do that? I can do that. Job, I can take Leviathan, I can walk and put him in a cage, take him for a walk, I can do all this stuff. You can't do that. And he says, or will you leash him for your maidens? Will your companions make a banquet for him? Can you capture him? Can you cut steaks out of him? Can you possibly? So you can see the vastness of this animal he's talking about. Can you put him on the barbecue, Job? No. Will they apportion him as with the merchants? And you're going to find him cut up in the markets. Can you fill his skin with harpoons? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hand on him. Remember the battle. Never do it again. Indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. So God is telling him, look at everything that you think that I'll come up with a way. I'll come up with a way. There's no way. I mean, we're not talking about crocodile. I'm not talking about something that, you get these guys, shoot him, Alice, shoot him, And they get on this show that Swamp Hunters or whatever it is. Oh, man, Elaine leaves the room when that show's on. But, shoot him, Alice, and they're out there and there's only a kill spot about the size of a quarter on the back of that gator. They look at that gator, and he's saying, you can't get this guy. You can't get him. There's a caption of a guy who was riding up a hill, and he says, some days you need motivation, or some days you need to get motivated, and then some days motivation gets you, and there's a bear behind him chasing him. I think of Leviathan here, There's no fishing technique that's going to work. There's none of this stuff that you can maneuver. No harpoons, no spears, none of this stuff. Nothing Job was capable of handling the situation to get this creature under control. You just can't do it. And that's the idea that God wants to give to Job. And he says, shall one not be overwhelmed at the sight of him? I mean, I'd be scared outright. But moving to the Northwest, the first time I started going fishing in one of the lakes, there's this little pond in Battleground. And it had grass up to about knee high, and I'm walking through it, and snakes just went, okay, there was 2 of them, but there was a lot of them, And I knew they were racers, but me and snakes, and I had nowhere to go. I just hate snakes. They're as bad as dentists, I just don't like snakes. I've gotten to like dentists a little bit. They give you a sucker afterwards. But I just can't, I don't like these things. And so moving to the Northwest, I'm thinking, what else do they have up here in the Northwest? I'm from San Diego. We have nothing but beach and seaweed and, let's do this. But listen, he's saying, you know what? Shall one not be overwhelmed at the sight of him? Look how big he is. And you think of this, in verse 10 he says, no one is so fierce that he would dare stir him up. I mean, what are you going to do? That's pretty stupid, right? Who then is able to stand against me? If you're going to wake him up, if you don't think, Job, you would wake him up, which is an accurate answer, I wouldn't wake him up. Why would you think that you would contend against me? Again, the whole idea here is, Job, what has been your thinking? Why do you think that you would contend against me? Verse 11, he says, who has preceded me that I should him. Everything under heaven is mine. So look at, I was the one who created him. I created you, as you said earlier. I've created everything that's there, and everything I created is mine. The idea, Job, I created you. He created each one of us for what? To have fellowship with us. He wants that. And the problems that we have and the times that we go through, as Job going into spiritual attack, we're to look to God. He wants us to look to him. Look, I can't handle it on my own, but I know that God can. You know, these people that say, devil, get away from me in the name of Jesus. And I'm saying, just turn him over to Jesus. Let him do the work. I'm not in a battle. I'm not going to battle Satan. A little wiser than I am. But I just, Lord, you got to take care of these things. You got to do these things. And he has a way of doing them. And so, again, everything that we have is so inadequate. Everything that we muster together, taking down this monster, and the idea that God wants Job to know that when it comes to contending with him, with God, he nor you or I have anything in comparison to the power that he has. Sometimes we look at that. You ever been into a trial to where you just feel like you just can't get out of it? Maybe you look at that trial and you say, you know what, God, I don't want to move. What did I get myself into? And maybe there are times I think the Lord allows me to stay in these things that he just might say, well, look, it's not going to be you, pal. I'll get you out of this. It's not you. Or I'll grow you through it more likely, right? And I think, you know, he uses this fierce amphibian to illustrate that man's inability to oppose God. You can't oppose this guy. I'm much bigger than he is. And if Job panicked seeing this creature that was there, how he dare confront the creature's maker, the creator of it all, telling him that he had done wrong. And so, in verse 12 he says, I will not conceal his limbs, his mighty power or his graceful proportions. Who can remove his outer coat? Who can approach him with a double bridle? Who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around? His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly as with a seal. One is so near another that no air can come between them, and they are joined one to another. They stick together and cannot be parted. And God is describing once again, just the impossibility for Job. He is like, Job, you're going to get this. And he will. You're going to get this. And again, God created him. And I'm not of the opinion that this is a huge crocodile or anything. I think God's created him and is showing him that, look, you could have got the point across with the other animals, the other 6 or 7 species that earlier in the previous two chapters. But that's not it. And again, I think what's going to be incredible, you can ask Mace Baker when he comes in September for the conference. And then in verse 18 he says, he sneezes, his sneezings flash forth light. Kind of interesting. And his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. You think about, even though thinking of a crocodile, you think about, you ever see the glass in the water and you see these two eyes popping up above that thing, lurking out of the water, only the eyes are to the surface. But I remember texting Ray. We were on a golf course. I was in Florida. I was on the 10th tee of a golf course with my brother and ready to tee off, and I texted Ray, and he goes, oh, I'm on the 10th tee up here. I don't know where you were up here playing golf. And then I looked around, and there was an alligator on my 10th tee, and I took a picture of the alligator. I said, I got one of these. I'm out of here. So, you have these alligators out there. I'm like, whoa. But he sneezes. His sneezings flash forth light, and his lights are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights. Sparks of fire shoot out. Then you think of dragons. They make this thing spewing this fire out of his nostrils and their mouths. Smoke goes out of his nostrils as from a boiling pot in burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. It seems like this creature may have been able to completely submerge himself underwater for quite a long time. And as he emerges from the water, he'll come up, and then at times it comes up and he just kind of peers up there. Verse 22, strength dwells in his neck. You ever see those muscles in the bodybuilders? He's got these piles of muscles on their neck. This guy had more piles. And sorrow dances before them. Everything fears in this creature's existence, in his path. And the folds of his flesh are joined together. They are firm on him and cannot be moved. His heart is as hard as stone, even as hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. Because of his crashings, they are beside themselves. Again, this has to be a pretty huge creature, big enough to even make the mighty men fear of him. You get multiple men to be afraid of him. 26, verse 26. Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does spear, dart, or javelin. He regards iron as straw. Can you imagine that? And bronze as rotten wood. He's just snapping these things. They say that the cedars of Lebanon are huge. And can you imagine just maybe, I don't know, whipping it with his tail or just crashing into them and breaking them over and all these things. It's like it's no big deal. I mean, he's like, get out of my way, I'm trying to make a path kind of thing. It's just a different breed of life, I guess, as they knew it back here. And again, though he reaches, so in verse 26 again, though he reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does spear, javelin, or spear, dart, or javelin. He regards iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones become like stubble to him. Darts are regarded as straw. He laughs at the threat of javelins. His undersides are like sharp potsherds, and he spreads pointed marks in the mire. So when he put, you're not getting him underneath. You're not going to submarine the guy and come up under him. He's like, he's just, the guy he has armor on. He makes the deep boil like a pot, and he makes the sea like a pot of ointment. And the whole thing is stirring up, just stirring the rivers or the sea, wherever he is. This guy's big, man. He's causing some fear in the eyes of people. And the point is to be well taken. It's just the whole idea. It's well taken. Job, this creature is so powerful. And you or nobody else, you can do nothing to gain an advantage over it, yet you seem to think you have an advantage over me. You're the creature's creator, And I don't think we say this vocally, but there are times where, I don't know, I hope we don't, think that, well, I've got this. I've got this. I'll just take control of this. That's a sad situation because God's really got this. He's the only one that does have it, no matter what we're going through. And I guess we can ask ourselves, maybe like Job. Job didn't know. Remember, he didn't know why he was going through what he's going through. We look back at and we go, oh, yeah, I know why, because Satan asked for you. That's why. He had a battle, a spiritual battle going on in his life. You and I, we know what spiritual battles feel like. We know what they're about. We know these things. But then we come to this place to where, like Job is, and God is pretty much at a place to where we're saying, hey, who's in control of your situation anyway? Maybe he might ask you that tonight, whatever you're going through. Well, hey, who's in control of your situation? You come in, maybe maybe it's not a good time, you're not having a good time, maybe things are going on, they're just not the best in life right now, but who's in control? Or check this out, maybe things are going well right now, who's in control? You can drive that ship right out of into the other ocean or right away from the wrong lane or whatever. Who's in control? And really, good times or bad, is God in control? And that's what he wants. He wants Job to know, look, I've got this. And he's been saying this, I've got this. You're going through a hard time. Don't look at the hard time. Just look to me. And then in times of difficulties, Job, just look to me. In verse 32, he says, he leaves a shining wake behind him. And one would think the deep had white hair. On earth there is nothing like him, which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. He is king over all the children of pride. I mean, it's like, this is the big dude that God is bringing out. I mean, all the creation he's talked about, this is the big guns that God is bringing out just to make a point to Job. But that's the grace of God. That's the grace of God. Just spending time with him, sharing with him. You know, look at, I've got this. Let me close with these thoughts. These two creatures, again, as I've been saying, they're so powerful. And nobody can take them down. Nobody can control them. You can't break them, tame them, anything like that. And the whole idea here is, Joe, if you can't control them, how are you going to control me? How are you going to control me? Nothing equals this creature, these two creatures. They're huge. They're afraid of nothing, yet everything is terrified by him. And even a haughty man crouches, a fear because of these creatures. And the uncontrollable animal, this huge animal, is king over the proud beast and man. And whereas Job couldn't humble it, he didn't have control over it. He couldn't bring it to the place where it needed to be. He didn't have that kind of thing. And God is just saying, look, I want you to understand something. I'm using this is like a parable in a sense. I'm using this as an illustration to bring across a point. You can't single-handedly take care of these creatures, nor can man conquer evil in the world, which these creatures symbolize. Only God can do that. Only God is able to take control of the situation that you're in. And Job, all your defiancy, questioning God and questioning his ways, you know what? As if God were incompetent and evil had control. I mean, what are you doing? A lack of faith leads us to many interesting things. And sometimes we need to look to God and say, God, increase my faith. Help my faith. And then we realize what he says, that, you know, if you want strong faith, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And we need to be reading the word. We need to be spending time with him. Is God, you know, think about this in Job. Is God incapable of taking care of our issues tonight? Is he incapable of taking care of our problems, the things that we face? Is he incapable? And how are we going through the process? Are we really complaining, or are we contending? Are we complaining, oh God, I'm going through this again? Are we contending with him, wrestling with him? What are we doing? How are we doing? Are we just praising the Lord? Lord, I'm glad, as we saw Sunday in Philippians, Lord, I'm glad that I have you to walk me through this. Isn't that such grace? That we have God to walk us through anything that we'd ever go through. No matter how big it is, how bad it is, no matter how heavy it can be, we have God to walk us through anything and everything in our lives. And we just come to him and say, God, look, I can't handle this. And we have the Holy Spirit. Job never had that. Believers today have the Holy Spirit. God, I can't handle this. But you can. Lord, would you take it? Would you just take this? Free me up tonight? And may you be glorified. Let's bow our heads and pray.